They have done it again. The Sunni Muslim terrorists known as ISIS have executed another kidnapped American. They released a video today purported to show the beheading of 31-year-old Steven Sotloff. ISIS, which is out to set up an Islamic State in parts of Iraq and Syria, would like us to show you the most graphic images on that video as part of their campaign of terror. We will not. Here is our Homeland Security correspondent, Bob Orr.
The video, titled A Second Message to America, is a grim replay of last month's murder of American reporter James Foley. This time it's another U.S. journalist, Steven Sotloff, who, like Foley, is shown kneeling in an orange prison jumpsuit at a dusty, desolate spot in Syria. Once again, a masked man with a knife, speaking in a British accent, explains Sotloff is being killed for ongoing American airstrikes against the terror group ISIS.
I'm back, Obama, and I'm back because of your arrogant foreign policy towards the Islamic State.
Just before his purported beheading, Sotloff recites clearly scripted propaganda, asking why he has to pay the price. After killing Foley 2 weeks ago, ISIS warned Sotloff would be next. Sotloff's mother pleaded with the terror group's leader to spare her son.
I ask you to please release my child. As a mother, I ask your justice to be merciful and not punish my son for matters he has no control over.
Today, a spokesman for the Sotloff family would only say the family knows of this horrific tragedy and is grieving privately. Time, which had published his stories, expressed shock, saying of Sotloff, he gave his life so readers would have access to information from some of the most dangerous places in the world. ISIS has made it clear the horror may not stop with Sotloff's murder. On the tape, the masked executioner presents a British hostage identified as David Cawthorne Haynes and suggests his life now depends on the actions of the U.S. and British governments.
The Sotloff video was released shortly before President Obama left Washington for a NATO summit in Wales. It is about, among other things, the crisis in Ukraine. The president will be stopping first in the former Soviet Republic of Estonia. Chief White House correspondent Major Garrett is there. Major?
Charlie, President Obama was briefed on the Sotloff video before leaving Washington. The White House has feared for Sotloff's safety since the ISIS video of James Foley's execution first surfaced 2 weeks ago. The second murder of an American intensifies pressure on the president to develop a military strategy against ISIS in Syria, its base of operations. Last week, the president admitted he was still searching for that strategy and weighing whether or not to launch airstrikes on ISIS targets inside Syria. But Syria is not on the agenda here in Estonia. Later this week in Wales, the president will seek help from NATO allies to battle the terror group. The intelligence community is working to authenticate the Sotloff video, but Charlie, officials here tell us they have no reason to doubt that it's real, calling it another sickening act of terrorist brutality.
Major, what does the president hope to accomplish in the deteriorating situation in Ukraine?
Well, he's here in the Baltics. He will meet with all three presidents of Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia to send what he hopes will be an unmistakable message to Vladimir Putin that NATO is a real common defense alliance, and any military incursion in any of the Baltic states will be repelled by U.S. and NATO forces. The president hopes that message comes across loud and clear. Charlie?
Major Garrett in Estonia, thanks. Tonight, the FBI is trying to find the computer hackers who posted nude photos of female celebrities on the internet. The images were stolen from private accounts. John Blackstone reports on how this may have happened.
Apple says it spent more than 40 hours investigating how hundreds of photos, including nude images of Oscar winner Jennifer Lawrence and other celebrities, were stolen by hackers. In a statement today, the company says the celebrity accounts were compromised by a very targeted attack on usernames, passwords, and security questions. Apple says it found no evidence of a breach of its iCloud service that automatically stores user data. But the very nature of cloud computing has increased the risk that what is private can become public. Kevin Mahaffey is with Lookout, a mobile security company.
Before the cloud, if somebody guessed your password, they'd have to go steal your laptop or your phone in order to get access to your data. Now, they can be anywhere in the world and use that password and take your data.
The cloud is actually firmly on the ground, huge computer server facilities. They allow someone with a smartphone, a tablet, and computers at home and the office to access all their information anywhere, anytime. A document or photograph on one device can be viewed on all and even shared with friends, family, or co-workers. And it's not just photographs and emails that are kept in the cloud. Details about our entire private lives, including finances and health, are there too. My medical records may be kept by a hospital, by a doctor. I don't know what cloud service they're using.
Well, and that's the problem right now, is it's really hard to tell the difference between a secure and an insecure cloud service.
If it's up there, somebody may be able to find it.
You can never rule out anything.
By now, most of us know what security experts advise: create longer, more complicated passwords. But just like the advice from the doctor to get more exercise, Charlie, we know it's good for us, we don't always do it.
Posting intimate photos of celebrities online may be wrong, but is it illegal? Apparently it depends. Here's Elaine Keanu.
The law and penalties for stealing private information are clear, but there's little recourse for those who've had intimate photos stolen and shared. Just 14 states have enacted laws dealing with unwanted distribution of private images, including nude photos.
It's extremely difficult to police it.
Attorney Stephen Capone is with Cybersecurity Law Watch, a firm that advises businesses and individuals on privacy issues.
The problem there is you have a patchwork of 50 different laws, and the individuals, both the person whose photos were taken and the person who takes the photos, are often located in different states, and therefore it's unclear what law applies.
Recent high-profile cases have drawn attention to what investigators call sextortion, cases where hackers obtain intimate images of a victim and then threaten to post them online unless a victim pays, as was the case 2 years ago with Miss Teen USA Cassidy Wolf.
You have what are 20th century laws trying to be applied to 21st century problems. And I think what they're really looking for, or what is needed, is a comprehensive set of laws that would afford the protections I think people are looking for.
Prosecuting these cases can be difficult, in part because of complicated digital trails that obscure who's responsible. And even when cases are pursued, courts are sometimes hesitant to send people to jail.
It's very hard to unring the bell because you can't take back images. You can't cause people to unsee what they have seen. And it's almost impossible to completely scrub the web. So although you may have the ability technically to pursue someone criminally or civilly, the ability to find them and to obtain peace of mind and to, what you would say, obtain closure is very remote.
There is a federal law some prosecutors are beginning to use to go after this type of crime. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is an anti-hacking law. Charlie, it includes 5 to 20-year prison sentences for those convicted of gaining unauthorized access to another person's computer.
Elaine, thanks. The hunt is on tonight for a handful of teenage delinquents, the last of more than 2 dozen who broke out of a detention center last night in Nashville, Tennessee. Mark Strassman is in Nashville tonight with more about how it happened.
Shortly before 11 last night, right after a shift change, officials say the teens kicked through a metal panel under a window and got outside. They pulled up a weak section of chain link fence and ran for a nearby highway. It apparently took unarmed guards an hour and a half to realize 30 teens had slipped off the property.
This was a security breakdown.
Clearly it didn't turn out the way we needed it to.
Rob Johnson is the spokesman for the Tennessee Department of Children's Services, or DCS.
What is your sense of whether this was a planned mass escape?
I can't speculate. I think it's a reasonable question.
8 teens remain on the loose. Most of the facility's residents have at least 3 felony convictions. Overnight, at least 3 escapees were turned in by their families, but most were caught by police, who complained how long it took DCS to notify them of the mass escape. But DCS says it does not want cops with guns in a detention center for juveniles.
We can't allow weapons on our facility, and the police, I believe, are feel pretty strongly about not coming in unarmed.
Tonight, the U.S. military went after the lead of another Islamic terrorist group, this one in Somalia. More about that now from National Security Correspondent David Martin at the Pentagon.
The target was Ahmed Godan, who U.S. intelligence had followed as he drove through al-Shabaab territory in southern Somalia. Manned and unmanned aircraft fired Hellfire missiles and laser-guided weapons at his car and at a tent where he was to spend the night. 3 people were killed, but Pentagon spokesman Admiral John Kirby said there is as yet no hard proof Godan was one of them.
He is the recognized appointed leader of the al-Shabaab network in Somalia. So if he was killed, this is a very significant blow to their network.
U.S. intelligence has been tracking Godin, who went by multiple names, for years. And the State Department has offered a reward of up to $7 million for information leading to his capture or death. According to this wanted poster, he was 38 years old. Al-Shabaab is best known for the attack 1 year ago when gunmen seized the Westgate Mall in Nairobi, Kenya, and terrorized shoppers during a 3-day standoff which ended in a shootout with police.
Godin publicly claimed al-Shabaab was responsible for the Westgate Mall attack, which killed and injured dozens in Nairobi.
U.S. intelligence thought it had located Godin at least once before, but an operation to get him was called off at the last moment for fear he had been alerted.
Weather's headed east from the nation's midsection tonight. 11 million people could be affected from Tennessee to New York. Don Dayler reports the storms may have already left their mark elsewhere.
In the Great Plains and Midwest, summer's unofficial end was noisy and violent. A storm chaser captured this video of a massive bolt of lightning in Denison, Iowa. 7 tornadoes touched down in 3 states. This one stalked the Kansas farmland. That same storm system pelted the area with hail the size of tennis balls. In Michigan, heavy rain and strong winds brought down trees and power lines.
His head was bleeding and stuff, and he was under the head was under the tree. The broken 2x4 went across his neck.
One couple was trapped inside their house by a fallen tree. Neighbors rushed to help.
I ran out the door and hollered down there, and I saw her climbing through the wreckage, and I could hear him yelling for help.
People attending holiday events fought the high winds and raced for shelter. In Detroit, floodwaters forced cars onto sidewalks as residents worked to unclog drains.
The cold front that spawned these storms is slowly headed east and is expected to weaken. Charlie, after a relatively mild summer, New York City today sweltered under the highest temperatures since last September.
It sure did. Thanks, Don.
They survived against all odds. Alida Sabanova and her 2 daughters lived through the Baseline school siege. They were among more than 1,000 children, staff, and parents held hostage by heavily armed Chechen extremists. When Alida and her daughter Amina returned for this special commemoration, the memories came flooding back.
Начали все куда-то бежать, а я не могу, меня вообще могли бы, наверное, затоптать. И меня хватает чья-то рука, а в ней еще было много маленьких рук. И это, оказывается, была учительница.
Terrorists took the hostages to the gym. A little later, her mother voluntarily entered the building to be with her daughters.
Когда я подбегала к школе, то у ворот меня встретил боевик. Я подняла руки и сказала: «Можно мне туда?» Он сказал: «Туда можно всем, оттуда никому». И как бы толкнул автоматом, прикладом, и я забежала.
И я сидела, а я как бы никого не знала, вообще рядом знакомых не было. Я еще маленькая была, и я стою, передо мной чьи-то ноги. Через какое-то время оказались, я поднимаю голову, смотрю, мама стоит.
They stayed in that gym with her father, school principal Tarkan Sabanov, through most of the 52-hour ordeal.
Ребенок кричит, плачет, потому что он маленький, потому что он хочет пить, потому что он устал. Они кричат: «Заткните ребенка, или мы сейчас перестреляем все плафоны, чтобы они вам свалились на голову и порезали вас».
Tarkan Sabanov, Amina's grandfather, didn't survive.
А я сидела и начала плакать: «Где дедушка?» Я спрашивала: «Где дедушка?»
Years later, the blood is gone, but the pain remains.
While the Baseline school gym has been cleaned up and turned into a memorial for the victims, the school hallways remain virtually untouched since that terrible attack 10 years ago. The walls still bear the scars of the bullet holes that run from the floor up to the ceiling.
Alida even prayed for their own deaths to end their suffering, but she and her daughters made it through and haven't lost their faith in the future. Amina says the nightmare inspired her to help others, and she's studying to become a doctor.
Backed by the Iraqi Air Force, Iraqi Kurdish joint troops and Shia volunteers have managed to enter the strategic towns of Sulaymanbeg and Yankaja. The advance comes after ISIL's 80-day-long siege on the Turkmen Shia town of Amirli has been broken. ISIL fighters have also been forced to retreat out of Tushurmatu and Al-Zab, south and southwest of Kirkuk, near Iraq's largest oil refinery, the Beji refinery. The Beji refinery has been contested for weeks now.
Those areas were used by ISIL as base to launch attacks and ready booby-trapped vehicles to then detonate them in regions north of Iraq. The main route that passes in Tuz-Khormati and connects Baghdad to Iraq's north has been secured as well.
In Mosul, ISIL has reportedly evacuated its posts and bases ahead of U.S. airstrikes expected to back a Kurdish advance in the upcoming days. The Kurds are already locked down in fierce clashes to recapture the district of Zumar, northwest of Mosul in Nineveh province. So far, the anti-ISIL forces have been advancing swiftly in Salahuddin province as well. They have recaptured a number of strategic towns and villages including Darli, Tuzkhurmaru, Ghasadani, Ghamas and Habash.
We have a joint operations chamber with the Iraqi army. Due to the efforts of the Kurdish Peshmerga, the Iraqi forces and the volunteers, we succeeded in ending what could have been a humanitarian disaster in Amirli as well.
The Iraqi Defense Ministry has confirmed the death and capture of no less than 90 ISIL militants in the recent confrontations. The Kurdish-Iraqi joint efforts in the last 3 days have certainly paid off. Their success in breaking the siege on Amirli and eliminating ISIL's 11-week-old grip of the strategic town of Sulaymanbeg have been described as the biggest offensive success yet for the anti-ISIL campaign. Many argue, however, that the success on the battlefield will only be complete if mirrored with a political success translated into the formation of a new national unity government.
A third American missionary working in Liberia has contracted Ebola. SIM-USA said Tuesday one of their doctors, an obstetrician, is now in the group's Ebola isolation unit, part of a hospital in Liberia's capital, Monrovia. The doctor hadn't worked directly with Ebola cases at the hospital, unlike two other infected Americans now back in the U.S., recovering.
In Sierra Leone,
Doctors Without Borders told the UN they're overwhelmed and losing the battle against the outbreak, which has now claimed more than 1,500 lives in West Africa.
Ebola treatment centers are reduced to places where people go to die alone, where little more than palliative care is offered. It is impossible to keep up with the sheer number of infected people pouring in our facilities.
The director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the Ebola epidemic is spreading wildly, but can be stopped.
There is a window of opportunity to tamp this down, but that window is closing. We need action now to scale up the response.
Dr. Tom Frieden just returned from a tour of affected countries.
It's spreading from just two routes: people caring for other people in hospitals or homes, and unsafe burial practices where people may come in contact with body fluids of someone who's died from Ebola.
Frieden says more resources, plus technical experts, and a unified global response will curtail the spread if done quickly.
Story number 4. Pro-Russia militias in Ukraine say that they have taken control of a road that links Donetsk to Mariupol. The announcement comes hours after Ukraine said that Russian forces have been seen fighting along pro-Moscow militias in the two eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk.
Armed forces of the Russian Federation are continuing to concentrate human resources and military vehicles in seized towns. Russian divisions have been seen in Donetsk, Ambrosiyivka, Starobesheva, Huselchikave, Novazovsk and Marikina, in the Donetsk region and in Luhansk region, as well as in the city of Luhansk.
The military officials said 15 Ukrainian forces have been killed and 49 more injured in fighting over the past 24 hours. He accused Moscow of delivering material support to the Russian armed forces and the militias inside Ukraine. Earlier, the Ukrainian defense minister warned of what he called a great war launched by Russia. The Ukrainian president also accused Russia of launching a direct invasion on his country. But the Kremlin says that it is shocked by the allegations. Robin Dolstra is a political commentator joining us from Sevastopol to tell us what he thinks about these developments. Well, Robin Dolstra, the warnings are pretty stark. I mean, they're pretty deep and very dangerous. You have the defense minister of Ukraine saying the Great War of Europe is at the doorsteps. It's going to claim tens of thousands of lives. You have the Russian President Vladimir Putin saying, let's not forget that Russia is a nuclear military power. Do you think these are just statements, or do you think there's actually the possibilities of a confrontation that could be of great magnitude, not to mention a nuclear one?
I don't think that is the matter at this moment. It's just a lot of propaganda up and down from one party to the other. And Ukraine is calling a lot of things, that Russia did invade already Ukraine. There's no proof, there's no pictures, no videos, no satellite views, nothing of that. While the other side has a lot of proof about war done by Ukraine. So I don't think that it will be nuclear war, first of all. Of course, NATO is building up in the former Soviet states in the Eastern Bloc, but that doesn't matter so much because Ukraine is a neutral country and not a NATO member, and already some NATO states told that they will veto the membership away from NATO by Ukraine.
So you really think that what the Russian president has said is just something he won't go through with? I mean, he said, as a warning to the Manuel Barroso, he said, if I wanted Kiev, I would take it in 2 weeks. He's also said that, you know what, we are acting against our national security, also denying reports of any Russian troops being inside Ukraine, even though there's many news outlets that are saying there are. What, is Russia really not is neutral? I mean, let's put it this way: is Russia neutral in this case?
Russia is not neutral in this case, of course. Russia is still helping Ukraine. They still give gas without any payment. They still give help to refugees. They still take refugees from eastern Ukraine up in Crimea and in Russia itself. So they're helping on all sides. At this moment, there's no proof at all that there's one Russian soldier serving in Russia. What is there? There's people who go there from free will. But on the other side, in Ukraine, there is proof that there are Americans, Polish, Lithuanians, all kinds of nationalities serving the Ukraine military army. And it's right, if Putin would come to Ukraine, he wouldn't do it like now. He would be even sooner than 2 weeks in Kiev.
Thank you very much for that. Very well. Thank you very much for that. Robin Dolstra, political commentator there from Sevastopol. Yemen's Shia Houthis reject the president's offer of a national unity government and his decision to partially restore fuel subsidies. Earlier, Yemeni officials said that President Abdurrahman Mansur Hadi will appoint a new prime minister within a week, but a spokesman for the Houthis has called on Yemenis to hold new protests against what he called corruption. Anti-government protesters, including Shia Houthis, have held daily protests across Yemen over the past weeks, demanding the government to step down. Security forces have, on numerous occasions, used force against protests, but this has failed to end the unrest. Yusuf Meyer is our correspondent who joins us from Sana'a to tell us about the crisis there. Well, Yusuf, there has been word and news on the fact that these protests are going to continue, even if it means that the government forces are going to get involved and people are ready to get martyred for their cause. So this is pretty serious. And of course, give us the latest about how the offer from the president has been rejected by the Houthis.
Well, regarding the president's offer to partially mount the practice of people and to sack certain cabinet and prime minister, also this is basically something that's holistically has been rejected by the Houthi leaders, who rejected it only a few hours after the head of the government announced that it had reached an agreement with the Houthis. Actually, Houthi officials immediately stated that it does not represent the Houthi movement and only represents some of the demands of the Houthi movement. Only in the cases afford
to pay this. They're referring to this this price hike of fuel as the inflation of death, simply because they cannot afford to pay 3,500 Yemeni riyals for 20 liters of fuel. I've spoken to a member of the Houthis' political office, Nasser al-Bukhaiti, who basically said that they partially agree with the basis of forming a new Yemeni government on the basis of an independent government free of foreign intervention and free of Saudi meddling. They basically don't want Saudi Arabia or the U.S. to intervene in Yemen's political affairs through utilizing political factions of Yemen to reach their foreign objectives here in Yemen. And this is basically what these anti-government rallies are all about. They're about forming an independent Yemeni government which meets the demands of the Yemeni people. They want this government to be free of all types of foreign intervention. So the proposed resolution, which was offered to the Houthis, the reason why it's been rejected is because it does not guarantee that there will be no foreign intervention, there will be no Saudi and U.S. intervention in the forming of a new Yemeni government.
So how do you think they're going to be able to get that guarantee?
Well, they're going to continue their anti-government rallies. They're going to continue, excuse me, they're going to continue their sit-ins. This is the third phase of their revolution. The Houthi leader, Abdel Malik al-Houthi, he mentioned 2 days ago that the Yemeni government has 2 weeks to meet the protesters' demands. Otherwise, quote, legitimate actions would be taken against those corrupt government officials who are in power to preserve Western interests. So basically, he's accusing the Yemeni government of treason, and this is something which we will see unfold throughout the week. The Houthis have rejected this peace initiative, so what that means is there's going to be the protests are going to intensify in the streets. Most likely the Yemeni government, after this proposed initiative was rejected, they're probably going to deploy more security reinforcement around the camp, the revolutionary site of the Houthis here in the capital, Sana'a. What that's going to do, it's going to eventually cause an altercation because the Houthis are going to continue to advance here in the capital, Sana'a. There are some suggestions that the Houthis are planning to actually wage a sit-in in front of President Abdurrabbu Mansur Hadi's compound. This will eventually lead to some type of altercation between the peaceful protesters and the security forces. And the Houthi leader, he has mentioned that if the security forces transgress against the peaceful protesters, then the Houthis will take the initiative to defend the protesters by any means necessary. So, as I mentioned, the Houthis, as of right now, have rejected this proposed resolution. However, the mediation committee is still in Sa'da as we speak right now, negotiating with Abdel Malik al-Houthi. And if they come to terms, we'll be able to find out maybe later on tonight or tomorrow. However, the anti-government rallies will continue. This is the third phase of the revolution. And Abdel Malik al-Houthi said that basically those who have been taken to the streets, the Yemeni people, will reach their demand, will establish an independent government free of Western intervention. Whether the political factions of the country, President Abdurrabbu Mansur Hadi, will agree to this remains to be seen. However, we can expect to see more anti-government rallies. We can expect to see some type of altercation break out, as this is basically the last week and a half that the Yemeni government has to meet the demands of the Houthis.
Very well. Thank you very much for that. Yusuf Mari there, talking to us from Sana'a.
If
I needed Bastian in these last years, I could always rely on him. He was here every time. The friendly against Argentina is not a revenge because the title is no longer up for grabs. There will be no revenge. The game in July was more important, but for both teams it's a good preparation for the next weeks.